What keyboard should I buy? That is such a common question that I get as a teacher. So today in this video, we're going to go through some real detailed specifics about what kind of keyboard might suit you. And as you're aware, there are so many different kinds of keyboards. Some of them are fantastic and some of them are pure junk. So the goal of this video is to find a good keyboard that fits you as a musician. Before we dig into the options available on electronic keyboards, let's talk about terms that you might hear. You might go into a piano store and you'll hear the salesman talking about something called a digital piano. This actually is a keyboard. But the digital piano market is typically made up of keyboards that are designed to be used at home and not moved around. And a lot of their emphasis on digital pianos is appearance. And they'll put a lot of emphasis on making the keyboard look like a piece of furniture. They'll include things like wood grain, or they'll even go so far as to try and make the digital piano look like an acoustic piano, and even give them like a grand piano lid or a grand piano case. It's amazing. Now you might get the impression that I'm biased against digital pianos. I'm not at all. They look fantastic. It's just good to know that a large portion of your purchase price is going toward appearance. Now here's how this plays out. If you buy the lower end models, well, they're still going to make them look good because they're going to be in your living room. So they're going to focus most of the quality and most of the expense on the case. So what can you do? Well, pull out your wallet, because whether you buy the low or the high-end version, you're going to pay for good looks. If you want good looks along with a great instrument, buy the higher-end model. In the long run, you'll be so glad that you did that. Another term you might hear when you're out looking for a keyboard is the term synthesizer. This is really an older term dating back to the 60s when keyboards actually did synthesize the sound. This means that they actually created the sound as it was being played. So the computer would create the sound using all kind of electronic components like modulators and oscillators and a bunch of nerdy things, but they were really quite cool. An interesting note is that synthesizers, true synthesizers, are kind of making a comeback, just like everything vintage kind of makes its way around again. Most modern keyboards are not synthesizers. Most modern keyboards have all the sounds pre-recorded. And so when you press a key, it simply plays back the pre-recorded sound. Finally, as you're out shopping, you'll hear just the general term keyboard. And this refers to what you see most of the time. Keyboards that are designed to take with you and move relatively portably. And these keyboards have a whole range of options, and really this is where we're going to spend the most of our time on the video today, talking about the options of the modern keyboard. The very first option that you should have on your list as you're looking for a modern keyboard is the feature touch sensitivity. This is very simple to understand, but it's not included in all keyboards. This simply means that when you press a key softly, the sound is soft, like this. And of course, when you press harder, the sound comes out louder. Now, the keyboard I'm playing has the option to turn touch sensitivity on and off. Let me turn it off and play a passage for you, and you can see how sterile and lifeless it sounds. All the notes will be exactly the same volume. Now I'll turn touch sensitivity back on in my keyboard. I'll play the same passage again and listen to the differences in volume or dynamics between the notes. And these differences are very natural. They're one of the most powerful things that makes music come alive. To get this feature, you've got to spend at least somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 for a keyboard, which, to be honest, is very, very cheap for a keyboard. But the cheapest of all the keyboards, like, $60, $70 at Costco or Best Buy, they probably won't have touch sensitivity. And here's the danger. If you start playing on a keyboard that does not have touch sensitivity, you'll develop a lifeless typewriter-like technique. and your music won't have any changes or dynamics. And you'll never have music that, frankly, people will want to listen to. So make this at the top of your list as you're shopping for a keyboard that has touch sensitivity. Option number 2, as you're shopping for a keyboard, you'll see that many keyboards have different numbers of keys. Now, the maximum number of keys, the biggest keyboards, have 88 keys, and this really is desirable. It matches the acoustic piano that you'll find in a concert hall. So if you can afford it, get a keyboard that has 88 keys. Some of the smaller keyboards have 76 keys or 61 keys or even 49 or 44 keys. And the manufacturers just keep chopping keys off from the top and the bottom to make the keyboards a little cheaper. Now, having said all that, sometimes you want a smaller keyboard just for portability. Or if you're a keyboard superstar and you want a keyboard you can strap around your neck and run around the stage, that's when you're going to want to have a keyboard with maybe 44 notes or something like that. But for the vast majority of us, you're going to want to have a keyboard that has 88 keys. And here's a real important point. Make sure the keys themselves, each one of the keys, are full size. On keyboards that are, for lack of a better term, toys, sometimes manufacturers will make the individual keys smaller. And that really will give you lots of problems in the long run, because as musicians, we rely on something called muscle memory, so that as you learn the distances between the notes, your hands will remember those distances. And as you graduate from the toy keyboard with tiny little keys to a bigger keyboard, you're going to be playing lots of wrong notes. And it's very difficult. I've seen people have a very difficult time getting over this hurdle. So buy a keyboard that has 88 full-size keys. Option number 3, and I really struggled whether I should put this as option number 2 or 1, because these top options are just so important. But this option is called weighted keys. So if you find a keyboard that has weighted keys, you'll have found a keyboard that's going to be the best keyboard for the long-term health of your hands. And what I mean is this: a keyboard with weighted keys actually has parts inside the keyboard that you can't see that have mass or weight to them. Then when your finger comes down and starts to press the key, all of that energy is transferred into those moving parts inside the keyboard, and those weighted parts begin to move. Now, in a cheap keyboard where there's no weighted keys and the key is simply held up with a cheap little spring, your finger comes crashing down. And as soon as that spring gets compressed and that key hits the dead stop on the bottom of the keyboard, suddenly you've got a shock wave that goes back up your arm. And guess what? After a couple months of playing a keyboard like that, you've got tendonitis. I know, because it happened to me. Back in college, I had a keyboard that didn't have weighted keys because college students don't have any money. So I had a keyboard that just had, little springs, and I played that thing. I lived on it night and day, and eventually I started getting tendonitis in both my arms. And the doc said, listen, if you don't stop doing what you're doing, you're not going to be able to play. So as soon as I found that out about that keyboard, I deep-sixed it. I got rid of it and spent the money. I actually went in debt, which I wouldn't advise, but I went in debt and got a great keyboard with weighted keys, and I haven't had a problem since. So if you want to play for years and years and minimize your risk of getting tendonitis, spend the money and get a keyboard that has weighted keys. Option number 4. This has to do with polyphony. Poly meaning many, and phone means sounds. So when you want to know about the polyphony of a keyboard, you want to know how many sounds it can produce at the same time. This has just been about the first half of this lesson, but the whole thing is posted online. I've placed the link there on the screen. When you go there, you'll also find a checklist that you can print out and take into the store so that you make sure you get the keyboard that you're looking for. This is David Sprunger from PlayPianoTODAY.com. Thanks for listening. Now you know what to do. Go practice.